What's up, everybody? Jason Webb, Web Applications, or the Marketing Correspondent. As a matter of fact, I'm starting to figure out how to basically maximize and optimize my time as it comes to publishing, whether it's on YouTube, if you're listening to this on iTunes, or whatever, the podcast. Try to figure out how I can do just one thing. In other words, I'm recording right now in front of a camera on my iPhone, and then I'm going to take that audio from the video, and I'm going to convert it and put it into an MP3, and then I'm going to put it onto my podcast. So if you've watched these videos before, or if you listened to my podcast, I'm just sort of giving you some insight into how I'm thinking and moving forward. And so I was calling this show, if you're watching it on YouTube, I was calling it the Marketing Correspondent Show, but I think I'm just going to keep it as Web Applications, WEBB Applications, because it's the web application, of course, that I'm releasing, Follow Up Fuel. I have a feeling I'll be releasing some others later. But then also because it's how is it applicable to what I'm doing in my personal life, and how my personal life is applicable to the web applications, the actual online stuff that I'm doing. And then just how is one, thing that I'm applying in my business applicable to your business, right? So if I'm learning something today, or, whenever I've learned something and it's applicable to me and I've put it into action and I've used it, then I'm not going to be greedy about it or selfish. Even if we are competitors, I'm going to share it with you so you can apply it into your business, or frankly your life as well. All right. So now that I've sort of set the stage for that, let me talk a little bit about. I'm going to go back before we get into how getting laid has made me successful. I'm going to just give you a little bit of a story to sort of put it into context, and it's going to start with when I first started getting into recruiting. This was back in, started recruiting in 2006. It's the end of 2006, I believe. Actually, no, I think it was 2007. I don't know. I can't remember. Somewhere around there. I never get that right. I should probably go back and look. But anyways, when I got into recruiting, I think it was like 2007. I think it was a year before Barack Obama got nominated. So I had been, recruiting specifically to find salespeople for technology companies, right? Actually, to begin with, it was just salespeople for companies, period. And then I realized I needed to niche down because I wanted to move a little bit faster and to be able to deliver to my clients a more reliable candidate pool, I guess, if you will, right? So I was focused on salespeople for technology companies, and not only for my clients, but also it benefited for me as well, all right? So in the beginning, I was just doing what everybody else was doing. I was using the job boards like Career Builder or Monster, and we had license and access to those sites. Indeed, I think, was another one, and we would just sit and look online at resume after resume after resume. If I found a resume I liked, I would either print it or I would just keep it on my screen, and I would just either make a phone call, send an email, or both to the candidate. Hopefully that candidate would respond. If they responded, I would talk to them, pitch them the job, and then send them off to the client, and hopefully the client would like them. But then I started realizing pretty quickly that because I was doing sales recruiting, that the best candidates weren't necessarily the ones that had resumes on these particular websites and platforms. They were candidates that didn't. They were candidates that had their heads down. They were, prospecting, looking for new business, about to close something, right? Always be closing. So they always had something closing. And if they always had something closing, it also meant that they also had money coming in the door, which makes it more tough to recruit salespeople, right? It's hard to recruit a successful salesperson, especially if he or she has, thousands of dollars at the end of the month waiting for them to be deposited into their bank accounts. So what I started doing was, one day, actually, I met a guy, or I talked to a guy this way, right? I found him on one of the career building sites, or one of the resume sites, and we met for coffee at a Starbucks. and he told me about this website called LinkedIn. At the time, I had never heard of it. A lot of people hadn't heard of it. As a matter of fact, it was free for everybody at the time. I don't even know if they had a premium model. But anyways, he told me about this website LinkedIn and thought that it would be beneficial to me. And so I immediately looked at it when I got back to my office, and then became a member. All right. And it was good. I figured it out pretty quickly to start looking at to finding the right candidates, identifying the right candidates, and reaching out to them through their InMail. I think at the time, it's been so long, but I think at the time I would send people invitations, because LinkedIn really just wanted to get member usage, right? They just wanted people to, they wanted to grow their user base. So it was one of those, what do they call it, net neutrality type of businesses where if it doesn't work, if I don't invite somebody to connect with me, right? So I was able to import all of my contacts from Outlook and all of my friends from wherever, Gmail, and then invite other people. But then also if I wanted to talk to somebody and communicate with them through their platform without having their email address or anything, it was just as simple as, hey, I'm gonna send this person an invitation to connect, right? So it was obviously, this was after Facebook had been, had some success in the social friend world. This was similar, it was just an invitation to connect. So I started connecting with people in the whole nine yards, right? So as a result, I started getting traction and building up a good group of connections that I had, specifically as it pertains to sales recruiting in the Boston area. And at one point, going, and thinking about the fact that I needed to find passive candidates, I remember I picked up this one particular sales position, which was it was really like a market research company, but they had a technical component because they were selling to technology people. And he wanted me to find people out of a particular company, right? He wanted me to find people out of a particular market research company, or he mentioned several market research companies. But I found one market research company that was that had a lot. It was like a blue ocean, right? It was like a blue ocean of candidates there that were just sitting ripe to be recruited, right? And so because I didn't have their email addresses, clearly I used LinkedIn, but I wasn't quite sure what the likelihood was that these people, if they didn't connect with me, how am I supposed to reach them? So at one point I figured out the email addresses for pretty much the syntax, right? The format for the email that was going to be used along the way for every single candidate. It was just first name, last name at companyname.com. I'm sorry, not first name. It was first initial, last name at company.com. So for me, it would be like the letter J, web, which is my last name, at followupfuel.com, right? And that was it for everybody. So as soon as I figured out what I was looking for within that company, all I had to do was just find the right people and then just start sending those emails out, right? And I remember when it started to work that I was like, wow, I'm like, this is great. I don't think anybody, it doesn't seem like I have any competition, right? Because when people are putting their resumes online, another consequence to that is that if somebody started putting their resume online, that means other recruiters are calling them, other recruiters are emailing them, employers are reaching out to them, and now they have 4 or 5 different opportunities juggling all at once, where these guys were, for all intents and practical purposes, passive. So I didn't really have a lot of competition, and I could feel it because when as they were responding to me and I was having conversations with them, they would share with me that they weren't necessarily in a lot of deals, right? They weren't considering a lot of companies at the time. But more specifically, the reason why they were responding to me was because of the emails that I was sending out to them. They were just, to my eyes anyways, they were very clear, concise, to the point, and had enough curiosity, I guess you can say, because I wasn't sharing the company name that I was recruiting for. I was just letting them know there's a fantastic company that wants to hire you. Let me know if you're interested. It was basically something around that line. And I remember my manager at the time would come, look over my shoulder. He was sitting behind me at the time, or, he was a proponent of, people being on the phone and talking to people. I was quiet most of the day because I was just sitting here toiling away, like sending this email. And what I did was I started to, once I realized an email template or an email format that worked, I just kept duplicating it and sending the same thing over and over and over again, right? I would tweak it here and there if I thought it needed to be tweaked, but I would essentially call this thing the blueprint, right? So the whole thing was I would, and I had another tool that I was using in conjunction with email to find, with LinkedIn to find email addresses outside of LinkedIn, right? Because I figured as this LinkedIn was becoming more popular, these guys in mailbox on LinkedIn would be flooded with other recruiters, but they wouldn't necessarily be flooded with recruiters the way I was doing it. So I would buy a database that would have names and email addresses. I didn't need specific names and email addresses. I just needed to know the name of the company and then one person's email address, which I can share a tip later about how to get that if you want. But basically, one person's email address is all I needed, and then I would go out and essentially guess, right, that the people that I wanted to reach would have the same format: first initial, last name at companyname.com. So once I figured that out and I started emailing people, I would create a template out of the email, and I would just send it over and over and over and over and over again, and I would get a bunch of people responding to my email, and then I'd start placing people, making money, and that's where I just sort of took off. And I would do that for every single position that I was recruiting for. So it wasn't just market research, it was all the software companies that I was recruiting for, whether it was inside sales, field sales, director of sales, VP of sales, it didn't matter. The whole thing was exactly the same, and it never stopped. And that's how I became successful in recruiting and eventually started my own business and have continued to do that and use that same blueprint, so to speak, in my own business over the last 8 years successfully, right? All right, so how does all that have to do with getting laid? Okay, it's extremely pertinent. Now, I don't know if that says more about me that I've created that headline, or you, because you're watching and wondering what I'm talking about here, or listening for that matter. All right, so I'll get to the point. What I just described to you was something that I have been doing ever since, and probably even before that, but certainly ever since. And I don't mean the templates and sending out the same emails and all and calling it the blueprint, but I mean the philosophy in the approach that I take, which is what I call getting laid, right? Now, I wasn't much of an avid, let's say, learner when I was growing up in elementary school, junior high, high school. Yeah, we had junior high when I was in high school. When I was a kid, and then it changed to middle school. But junior high, high school, on into college, like learning was just sort of something that I knew was necessary. You go to school, you listen to the teacher, you take notes, you take the test, you hopefully pass the test or get a decent enough grade, and then just move on to the next grade and so forth, right? And that's essentially how I went through school, right? I wasn't really passionate about learning. There was no real particular subject. I don't think that I was like, oh man, I can't wait to go to this class, unless it was like gym class or something like that, right? That's it. But since graduated from college, and I think in college maybe a little bit, some of the marketing courses and that type of stuff was interesting. I think philosophy was interesting to me, but certainly not managerial accounting, and most of it just wasn't interesting. English, it was just kind of boring. French class, who cares, right? That's how I looked at it. It wasn't until after I got out of college that I was developing my own curriculum, I guess, if you will, right? I was just sort of learning about stuff, and the stuff that I was learning and have been learning ever since was just about like how to make money online, how to start your own business, how to be financially free, how to be time free, how to anything and everything related to business. And the more I learned, the more interested I got, the more passionate I got about it, I realized that learning became more fun and easier to learn, right? All this stuff became easier to digest because I was just immersed in it all the time, and still am immersed in it all the time. And so lately I started sort of thinking about this and the framework with which I'm working, and it just sort of, I like acronyms, I like alliteration, and so this acronym that I use is LAID, right? So getting laid, right? So the L is, shame on you, by the way, if you're thinking about it. I was thinking of anything else because I'm not, all right? Oh, maybe, but that's a story for another day. But anyways, the L is for learning, right? So I learned, again, going back to the LinkedIn example and just the recruiting example, I learned, right? I wanted to learn how I was going to recruit, right? Because without that knowledge, I wasn't going to be successful. It means I wasn't going to make any money, and then I was going to be some serious trouble, and I couldn't afford to not make money. So I learned, right? The next thing I did was I acted, right? So as soon as the guy told me about LinkedIn, great, I signed up for LinkedIn. As soon as I realized that there was a better way to, that I found out there was a better way to communicate with candidates, I did. As soon as I realized that I could get email addresses a different way than everybody else was getting them, I did. And by the way, that other way, aside from just sort of buying the database and saying Jason Webbs, he's the founder of Follow Up Fuel, or he's the president of the J. David Group, this is his email address. Really, if you just go to a company's sort of press release page and just look for any press contacts that they might have, like the publicist or something like that, oftentimes they'll put that name somewhere, right? Or even if it's a publicly traded company, you can find it somewhere in one of their public comments somewhere, right? There's usually somewhere in a press release or in an online publication somewhere, or in a magazine, for instance, where you can find out what the email address is of one person, and then you can just sort of guess on who else has that same email address, right? And you can just find that person, the people that you want to find on LinkedIn, and just go from there, all right? So that's that. So that's learning, right? So I learned how to do that, and then I acted on it, all right? I acted on it. So I figured out what the email address is, and I was going to put those into place, right? And then I iterated, meaning that first I would send emails to people through LinkedIn. Then I would send them through just my Outlook and just right into their inbox. And I would continue to send the same email, and I was calling it the blueprint. But if I needed to adjust, I was going to adjust based on candidate feedback. What are they saying about my emails? Maybe one week the response rate dropped off a lot, whereas another week it didn't. And then I'm going to go back and look. Was it the subject line? Was it the first thing that I said? Did I put the salary information in there? Did I not put the salary information in there? Did I put where the company was located? So I was iterating, right? So I was learning, I was acting, putting it into place. I was iterating, saying, okay, what else do I need to change about this to make it even more successful? And then the last thing, the D, is duplicate, right? So how do I want to duplicate my success. So if I just had success based on everything I just learned, based on everything I just acted upon, based on iterations that I just made, then I'm just going to duplicate it over and over and over and over again. So that way I don't have to think, I don't have to guess, I don't have to, I just don't have to wonder, right? I can just sort of, because once I figure something out, I go really, really, really hard, right? No pun intended, given the subject line. But I go really, 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 really hard, right? And then that loop continues, right? I get late again, right? I learn because business is always changing, because life is always changing, right? And you have to sort of be aware and open to it. And that's what I do. So even though I'm going hard, I'm learning as I'm going hard, and I'm keeping my ears open to new things. I'm keeping my eyes open. I'm seeing different things, and I'm wondering. I have that sort of childlike sort of wonderment, right? Like everything is a possibility. I'm going to do what I'm doing over here, but I'm also going to listen and see if I can do if that person is doing something else, or those group of people is doing something else, right? And so that's how I've been able to be successful by getting laid, and how I'm going to continue to get laid, because I want to continue to be successful. All right. So you can take that, again, it's web applications. So you can do with that what you may, right? You can use it in your business life. You can use it in your personal life, use it in your sex life, for all I care. Right. But that's how I've been able to get to a degree of success, right? And everybody has a different definition of success. So I'm not standing here in front of a Ferrari or anything, or certainly, but the point is that the degree of success that I've been able to reach in my recruiting business, that's how. And now, as I'm transitioning from the recruiting business into the online digital software world and marketing world, I'm doing the same thing. So as I sit here in front of you and I talk to you about how I started off doing the YouTube, and then I also have the podcast, and I was recording that into one device, and then sort of trying to do it all together. I think it's better, and I'll find out. Again, because I was sitting here learning about how to do this 5 minutes before I recorded it. So about how to get the audio from YouTube and then put it onto my my podcast on web applications. All right. So that's what I'm doing, and you can follow along. Just subscribe to this page, subscribe to the podcast, leave comments, leave reviews, email me, and at jason@followupfuel.com, web at the J. David Group, because those are two different companies. And let me know your thoughts. I'd be curious. And so right now, I guess I'm in the learning and acting phase. I'm on the LA. Now, if I have to iterate, I will. And hopefully once I get to that point, I'll be able to duplicate. All right, that's it. Those are my web applications for today. I will see you guys next time.